Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Mei Lee Show. Glad to have you here if you're listening or watching. Happy Lunar New Year. Yeah, we're still in it. But this is now the year of the metal ox, if you didn't know that already. And, it's always fun to kind of like see what the Chinese astrology says about the year. So I decided to look it up. And so here we go. So the year of the metal ox. This year is going to be lucky and also perfect to focus on relationships, whether we are talking about friendships or love. In the Chinese zodiac, the ox is very hardworking and methodical. 2021 is going to be a year when work will get rewarded. And those zodiac signs who are lucky in terms of money this year will be the ones that will make a considerable effort. The yin energy specific to the Chinese zodiac sign of the ox will be quite poignant. This is going to be a year when we fully feel the weight of our responsibilities, a year when it is necessary to double our efforts to accomplish anything at all. Yikes. This year, no explosive or catastrophic events will occur. So it is a favorable year for economic recovery or consolidation, a year of long-term investments. Oh man, from my lips to God's ear, seriously. The metal ox year is also great for making order in the family life. After all, if the family life is peaceful, everything gets solved. Thus, 2021 is a year when all the problems get solved with discipline. A lot of discipline. Okay, so that's what one site says about this year. I am a horse. I'm actually a fire horse, which is a sign that only happens every 60 years. So mine apparently under the horse, it says 2021 horoscope predicts that 2021 can be a good year for financial growth and business expansion, but also a year of inner reconstruction by understanding the impact of their roots and childhood over their lives. During the year of the Ox 2021, the relationships, marriage, partnerships are finally enjoying more stability and construction after years when everything seemed unstable, temporary, and vulnerable to shocks. Actually, that's kind of true. Yeah, actually, that's pretty accurate. I've sort of lived my life as this roaming journalist all over the world. So I never set down any roots, and I was always kind of like flitting around. Well, that's why I'm a horse, right? Horses just need to keep running. Can't pen us in. You can't tame. Very difficult to tame. So did you know that back in the day, the year of the fire horse, the birth rate would drop dramatically because no one wanted girls, because girl fire horses are a nightmare. Okay, because we're independent. We need to run. We need our freedom. We can't be caged in. Hard to marry off. So yeah, nobody wanted girls. So that's, yeah. But then I popped out. Oh, well, sorry, mom and dad. Anyway, I am actually textbook fire horse. All right. So that, I just thought I'd throw that in because of the Lunar New Year. But now switching gears, to something far more serious. And, if you follow me on Instagram, of course, you know that I've been talking about all the attacks against Asians, especially senior citizens, that have been happening a lot in the Bay Area, but in New York as well and elsewhere. But it is shocking. It's alarming. It's despicable. It's disgusting. It's painful to watch these videos of the elderly getting pushed and unfortunately in one case killed, people being robbed, vandalism. I mean, it's nonstop. It's been nonstop. But because of what's been happening and because it is so, I think, so alarming to all of us, not just in the Asian community, people are paying attention outside finally. Because it's the elderly. They're the most vulnerable. They're the most innocent, besides children. And to see them getting attacked and hurt and killed is just too much to bear for all of us. So now we are seeing a lot more attention on this issue by the media, mainstream media, by big celebrities, by companies and corporations who are stepping up and making comments and saying that they're going to dedicate resources to solving this problem. Even Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, came out with a statement saying he's horrified and that, as a company, they're going to try to do what they can to contribute to different organizations and raise awareness. So thank God, finally, after this has been going on for certainly the past year because of COVID. And, I've been talking about this from the beginning. Thank God that now people are stepping up. Thank God that people are finally becoming aware and shocked enough to say, okay, this is bullshit. There's something wrong here, and we need to focus on this and put a spotlight on it. So I'm grateful to folks and organizations who are stepping forward and who are using their platforms that are much bigger than mine to get the word out and to try to incite some change and some tangible change. At the end of this broadcast, I'm gonna give you some more resources, but follow me on Instagram, The Mei Lee Show, because I've been posting information on how you can help and tangible things you can do to try to bring all of this to an end because it's insane. So this episode actually was kind of inspired by this, all of these assaults and especially the attacks against the elderly and the anti-Asian sentiment. I want to use the show whenever I can to help those who are trying to do good in the world, but may not have a big platform or may not have the resources, to get it out there, get the information out there, or get what they're doing out there because they're too busy doing what they're doing. And so I decided to talk to two different, one person who's doing something really unique, and then a group of people, filmmakers who have come out with a film that's very powerful. And so I want to start out with them. There's a movie called Happy Cleaners, and it is a story about a Korean American immigrant family. And it's a beautiful, heart-wrenching, authentic film about the immigrant experience, about how difficult it is immigrating to America and just being working class and being a shopkeeper. And this family happens to run a dry cleaners in Flushing, New York. And it's about the pain that immigrants go through, having to swallow their pride sometimes and having to deal with being invisible and treated like less than or treated like the outsiders, but still just plugging away. Why? Because they want a better life for their family, particularly their children. And then the children's stories about growing up, in this dual identity of being Asian, in this case Korean, but then being American as well, and that conflict, but then also trying to be a bridge between their parents' generation and then their generation.
How long did you have this business?
We have been here for 17 years.
다음 달에는 좀 나아지겠지.
누가 우리 편을 들어주니? 아무도 우리 편 안 들어줘.
It's not my fault you live like this!
너 엄마 아빠가 어떻게 살았는지 네가 알아?
What am I gonna leave behind? I inherited all this debt and struggle from my parents because their American dream fell apart.
Are you gonna work like this forever? Why can't you respect my decision?
야, 현이야!
You ever wonder if her family's blessed or cursed?
And this is our story, couldn't decide for me. But I'm not living wondering, yo man, if I only I'm gonna make it here cause my mama deserve it. She tried to make my life perfect with some laundry detergent.
It's just the fate of being children of immigrants. And it's even embedded in our ethnicity, in a form of a hyphen.
But anyway, Happy Cleaners is a movie that came out in 2019, but now it's being released on different streaming platforms. So I wanted to talk to the filmmakers about this film and the importance of the message, but also relating it to what's going on now because of all the anti-Asian sentiment against immigrants, but also the attacks on elderly and how this movie reminds us of the sacrifices that have been made by our parents and our grandparents, and everything that they have gone through to give us a better life and to survive in these conditions. And it's heartbreaking when you see suffering by our elders. And that's why the reality of what's going on now in places like New York and the Bay Area against Asian senior citizens is so real. And this movie really, it resonates in many ways. So I thankfully was able to get the three filmmakers, Julian Kim and Peter Lee. They are co-directed, co-writers, and then Kat Kim, who's a producer and writer on the film. And they joined me from New York to talk about the movie and to talk about the events of today and how it all relates and what we can do about it. So here you go. Hey, Julian, Peter, and Kat, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and I just learned that all of you are in New York and you live within about a 7-mile radius of each other. So you guys are obviously, geographically together, but you probably haven't been seeing much of each other, right, during COVID?
No,
Yeah.
definitely not.
Well, listen, I have to tell you that I watched Happy Cleaners when it came out in 2019. Okay, and this is how I watched it. A friend of mine somehow, I think, was associated with the movie. And so there are 12 Korean American women who got together and had a viewing party together. Yeah. And these are all very some are very high profile Korean Americans and very independent and, some second generation like me, others immigrants who had come when they were teenagers. So we all viewed it together. And I've got to tell you, we loved it. We were all bawling like babies in the movie because there's several parts in the movie that make you cry. And we were just so overwhelmed by the story and the authentic storytelling. It was such an authentic, real story. So first of all, I just want to say it was great and we loved it. And huge congratulations to all of you for making a film like this.
Thank you, May. That means a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Julian, let's start with you because this is sort of a story that is based on your life and your family experience, right?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, the only thing that might be special to me is that I'm the only cleaner's kid. But I think overall, we all agree that this is a collective experiences. And I think the title of the film might be misleading, that, they think it's a cleaner's movie, but it really is about a Korean American immigrant family and their experiences of growing up as an immigrant child. So you can replace dry cleaning with anything like grocery store, nail salon, and all that would kind of still work in terms of the narrative.
Yeah. Well, then Peter, let me go to you then. Because it's a collective story, I think that's why it's so relatable. And that's why 12 Korean American women can come together and watch this film and it resonated with each one of us, even though all of our family experiences were somewhat different, right? So did you guys intentionally then sit together and figure out, okay, what is going to feel real, in this story, and how are we going to make it so real?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Cleaners, really is a large representation of really the small businesses that many of our families own. So, my father, ran a shoe repair store. Kat's mother ran a nail salon. And so many of our friends, we all come from this small business background. And so that is just a Cleaners representation of that. And so because fundamentally, the experiences of coming from a family that runs a small business, all the ups and downs, the financial insecurities and all of that, and the added layer of, being working class, being an immigrant, like all of that stuff is such a commonly shared experience, in Flushing, but also, just elsewhere outside the country where if you have those labels, you would have gone through these exact same experiences. And so that's why we go back and say it's a collective experience, because you should have experienced this and you're seeing yourself represented. And so it's absolutely intentional that we wanted to make this as relatable as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Kat, I think the reason why this movie was so moving to those of us who have seen it, and hopefully more people will see it now that it's streaming, is that you guys really brilliantly captured the conflict of being immigrants and the struggle that immigrants go through, right? But then the children of immigrants and that identity crisis of wanting to be good kids of immigrants,
Right.
the good Asian kids, right?
Right.
And wanting to respect your elders and yet still being American and wanting that independence. And that's what you see with both the kids, right? With both Kevin and Hyunhee, right? And that struggle that a lot of people don't understand unless you have lived it like all of us have. All right. So tell me about how you guys wanted to get that in the film and really portray that accurately.
Sure. I mean, like you said, it's the struggle between the filial piety versus, our desires in America as Americans, right? Because we're born and raised here. So the way we were able to convey that was separately, both the brother and sister, Kevin and Hyunhee, they navigated in different ways, right? So I think at the end of it, we really wanted to confirm that they do really love their parents, but they also love their Korean culture because that's how we were raised. It's part of our makeup. We can't really shed that. And why would we want to shed that? Right. And then that's where the very pivotal conversation comes in the film, where the brother and sister talk about the hyphen generation. And we call ourselves a hyphen generation. Right. And in that small little hyphen, it holds the bridge between our Korean culture and our American culture. And in that, I think both of them were able to fulfill their filial piety, but also see that they can somehow pursue their own desires too, while still being good children.
Before I dig into a few more of the themes of the movie, I'm wondering for all of you, why did you want to make this movie? Because it is something that, let's see, how would I put this? It is something that if you didn't do it right, people wouldn't get it. And it wouldn't resonate, right? Because it is a subject that's it's pretty subtle in many ways, and so for a lot of people who might watch it, they might not get it and they might just tune out. However, that hasn't been the case. You've gotten a lot of accolades for the film outside of just the Asian community, right? So what was the balancing act for you guys in terms of wanting to do this movie?
Yeah, it was a when we started writing the story, we definitely wanted to write a story that represented our authentic experience growing up as a children immigrant, because we never seen stories like that on mainstream media or in any form of media. And we were like, how come, our stories are not told in a very authentic, genuine way? And, we just felt like there was a need. And if anyone could tell it, we felt strong that we were confident that we could tell it the best because we lived through it. So that was like our motive. And honestly speaking, there were a lot of doubts about how would the film be received once we put it out there, because we were very intentional about using English and Korean, and that alone kind of sets apart, I think, a division of people not wanting to watch the film, because it's hard to categorize it. It's like, oh, what is it, like a English film, or is it a Korean film? Is it American film, and all that stuff? But we were like, let's just not think about genres. Let's not think about categories, but let's just focus on our story and our experiences. And that was the reason why we felt motivated to tell the story and make no compromises to kind of like our true and authentic experiences. And like you said, I think it resonated with so many people because there's beauty in truth, and I think truth speaks the loudest in certain ways, and people really understood that.
Yeah. Well, you just touched on a couple of things. When we can take control of the narrative, which Asians hadn't for so long, right? All of our stories were being told by other people who were outsiders. So therefore, it was never a genuine experience, truly coming from those who have lived that experience. So that's one. And two, it's still the case. I mean, you guys made this a few years ago, but it's still the case where if something is not completely in English, the mainstream still says, wait a minute, is this a foreign film? Should it be in the foreign category? Just like Minari right now.
Right.
There was that
exactly.
whole controversy over the Golden Globe saying, oh, this is a foreign film, even though it's an American story, American made.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think filmmakers are still going through that challenge of where to fit in. I'm so happy to hear that you guys were like, well, fuck it. We're just going to do it, and take control, and we're just going to make it the way we want to. That's awesome.
Right.
And can I actually also add that the for us to have that kind of freedom and for us to not having to compromise those things, I think we really have to give credit to our executive producer, KoreanAmericanStory.org, because at the end of the day, who is doing the funding or who is helping with the fundraising? It's grassroots. It's coming from the community. We're not beholden to anybody else, calling the shots, telling us what to do. And so I really think that we were able to, hit those marks because we had that kind of freedom and the support from the community. Right.
So you didn't have a huge studio like changing the entire script, right? So that's good.
Go make them all speak English. Right?
Yeah, exactly. No, but I think, again, that adds to the authenticity, of that true experience. Let me go somewhere where it kind of relates to what's been going on here in the States with all the anti-Asian sentiment and the assaults that we all have been hearing about. And, it's getting a lot of attention finally. But it has brought the notion to the forefront of Asians having been invisible, right? Having no voice and being treated as, kind of we were dismissed often. And in this movie, and again, this is what I loved about the film, it does touch on that concept of never being welcomed completely, never having that true sense of belonging. And there's that scene with the mother and Kevin where she says to him, yes, we live here, we live in this country, but they will always see us as foreigners and we always have to go at it alone. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but it was a very powerful scene where she as an immigrant knows that, we're never going to completely belong.
케빈아, 우리가 여기를 우리 집, 우리나라 이렇게 부르지만 그 사람들한테는 우린 이방인이야. 우리가 여기서 살아남으려면 조심해야 돼. 안 그러면 큰일 나. 그게 우리 현실이야. 누가 우리 편을 들어주니? 아무도 우리 편 안 들어줘.
This is my country. And I would expect them to protect our belongings.
그래. 네가 네 비즈니스 한번 해봐. 법이 네 편을 들어주는가 안 주는가.
So tell me about that scene and writing that scene, how important that was.
It was absolutely important, just because I think that's a conversation that most minority American families have, some form of it. And, it was a conversation that I had. I came to the States when I was 6 years old. And I, starting first grade, that's the first thing my mom sat me down and said, you're in a different environment now. You can't act the way, you would have freely acted back in Seoul, kind of like knowing your place, because that is a way to survival. And as a child, I think if you keep hearing these things, like it's not good for your psyche, obviously.
Yes.
And then I think the other part is as you grow older and, you embrace your American identity, part of it is we feel entitled to, this is our country. We are in all of these, the rights and the respect, we deserve it too. And so we have this going on. That's what I think the children have, as opposed to where the parents' generation still have a very strong urge to put up that balancing act, because the reality is that's how they survive. That's how we
Yeah.
survive. And I
Right.
think that's the unfortunate reality, but it's just but it's reality. And I think that scene, we really want to communicate, hey, like this is a very a real thing, the conversations that we have, and this is our reality. So we want to just share that with the world.
I think that's why it was so painful to watch that scene and other scenes in the movie where it was, you guys did such a good job in illustrating that, you know, in the film, that pain, that suffering, that internal suffering that a lot of immigrants go through, just swallowing, you know, that pain and just, you know, suffering through it, right? Because they feel like they have no choice. They have to, right? So Kat, again, I mean, I want to bring you into this. I'm sure you too, like Peter's saying, that conversation was had by most parents to children. My parents said that to me. They said, you know, because of what you look like and who you are, you're going to have to work twice as hard.
Right.
If you're next to a white, you know, person and they're going to look at, you know, you and her, they're going to choose her. You know, I mean, it was that was programmed into my mind as well.
Right. And additionally, I remember having those conversations where you had to suppress a lot of who you can be, or suppress any kind of, you know, being vocal, because it was basically just put your head down and just work hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not a coincidence that we have that model minority myth, because it kind of melds into that.
Right.
Where do we get that? It's because we've been taught just be quiet and work hard, and at some point you'll be okay. But then why can't we be vocal, or why can't we be who we want to be here?
Right.
And that's because of all of these issues and all of these you know, racialized tensions and things that are just imposed on us out of our own free will.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so Julian, you know, again, you guys made this film a couple years ago, way before any of this COVID, xenophobia, racism was, you know, happening, right? So now you look at this film and you're touching on things that, you know, resonate now because of what we're going through. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on now how you look at your own film, you know, in parallel with what the reality is right now in this country?
I guess it's just unfortunate. It's the same.
Yeah, I
And
know.
I guess that the reality is it's being unearthed. The kind of tension that's been happening, and yeah, I think with everything happened with xenophobia and the kind of anti-Asian kind of attacks is unfortunate, and I guess it's in a way interesting that it's getting a spotlight now. But for sure, like it's something that we've all experienced, and as people who assimilate more to this country and who identify themselves as an American, I think it's time for them to vocalize more and really speak up and really protect, you know, the elders and the older generations who feel like they're guests in this country. And, you know, be like, no, like you are family, you are blood, you are one of us. And, you know, this is the place, you know, you build. And even though I may not be Kim Kimshi, I am still a Kim. And you are setting new legacy here, and you are the founding of the legacy, and you deserve, rightfully so, to be a part of this country more than anything. And I think it's just something that I personally feel that we should just continue to fight for and stand for. And that's unity, and that's for you know, seeing that our stories and our lives and our experiences really matter in shaping this kind of American narrative.
And I think you touched upon it. It's the respect for elders because of all the sacrifices they've made, and that we need to recognize that. And I think that's why the attack on, you know, elderly Asians lately have really inflamed emotions. Right? It really has triggered something in all of us, because especially within the AAPI community, I think it's reminded us of what a treasure our elders are. And that idea of that Confucian idea of respecting our elders and treating them as such. And that's what, again, I loved about this movie, is that even though there was that conflict between the new generation and the older generation, at the end of the day, there was still that idea of respecting your parents and your grandparents, because of all that they have done and all the sacrifices they made. That, to me, was such a beautiful message and a reminder of that notion.
Right. I think part of that is maturing too. It's coming to see that the strong dad that you saw growing up, or the very stone cold mom that you saw is actually aging, and they're getting older and they're vulnerable, and they're the ones who are going to get attacked, and they're the ones who get hurt for the most. And it's really for us to really like you said, take care of them and honor them and understand it was their sacrifices.
That's right. Peter, let me ask you this then. The role of art and film when it comes to getting these kinds of messages out. And I think obviously with Happy Cleaners, you guys are sending a message out about the immigrant experience and deeper themes within that. So tell me, in this day and age where there is so much conflict and just like so many opinions and so much, sort of angst, how important is art to playing a role in, contributing to the conversation and inciting some change, perhaps?
I mean, it's so critical. Artists of all medium, they're setting out to, communicate, right? Communicate truth. And so, through our film, we were really just trying to share real experiences as we lived it, no sugarcoating.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that, through that, folks, if from folks from our community, we hope that you saw yourself represented and you're able to, feel some pride in that, you're seen, and so let's celebrate that. And for folks outside of our community, hopefully you're able to see the shared humanity and just, see us for, who we are, not as caricatures, not as whatever you want us to be, So that was our intent, and we had hoped to use this vessel to communicate that to the world and our audience. And so I'm sure any other artists out there, when they're creating something, they have a message and they want to, say something. And so in this day and age, with everything going on, we're hoping that there are more truth tellers, and also the space is, hospitable for these, truths to come out, and then hopefully it'll help with the healing. That's, there's so much, divided pain and it's felt throughout the country. We just hope to be a part of that change.
Kat, let me have you join in.
Yeah, to add to what Peter eloquently said, it's also going back to the original question of what is your intention of why you want to show this. I mean, who are we? We are just this ethnic enclave in Flushing, Queens, this small community of Korean Americans in Flushing, Queens, right? But there are so many other thriving Koreatowns in America. Yep. And, we are a thriving people. We are a very loving people. We are a great community, and we exist throughout America. But we also want people to know that we do exist. We are a great people, and we are also part of the makeup, which is not readily, conveyed in America, but we are part of that makeup. Why aren't we? Right. So that's also why we want to convey that. Yeah. And yes, as you said, we do exist.
And not to mention that we have amazing food, which was featured throughout the film. I noticed it was just like, there was always a food, shot, or like someone cooking, or obviously eating together as a family. That's a big deal, in Korean culture. So I love the fact that you were incorporating, some of the traditional food and the way in which Koreans eat together and how important that is. So let me ask you all this then. What has been the most surprising reaction you've gotten from this movie? Because like I said, I just shared my experience with watching it with, Korean American women, but, within AAPI, but also outside. I mean, has there been a moment where you're like, wow, I did not expect that?
Yeah, I think the most shocking one was when we showed it to our friends who grew up in Flushing. We were like, the reaction we expected was like, yo, thank you, man. That movie was great. You got my life down. But then the subtle reality was when they watched the film, they had this kind of like stone face, and they're like shocked. And then they were like, I need time.
Really?
And then they were like, they would kind of retreat and like the next day they will call and be like, "Yo, let's talk about the movie."
Wow.
Because I think Peter said it the best. He's like, you took a Band-Aid right off my wound, and really and we went through this kind of therapeutic process of going over our past and talking over things and our struggles and pains. And I think that was like a shocking, I guess, reaction for sure.
Yeah, I could see that because again, after we all watched the movie, all the women, we sat there for at least an hour and literally had like a therapy session.
Oh, wow.
I'm not kidding. We were all crying and we were like trying to gather ourselves, and each one of us shared what resonated, for us in the movie, and sharing our own personal experiences, stories that we were reminded of, from our past. So that I can see why it has a profound impact. And as filmmakers, you guys, I mean, that's the best thing you could possibly want in what your creation triggers in people.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's anything else, Kat or Peter, that you can think of that surprised you guys?
I went to we screened at this festival, and I went without the gentleman. I was assigned and deputized with the honor of going to Cincinnati, Ohio, for a festival there. Not a lot of Asian people.
No, I grew up in Dayton, so I know Cincinnati really well.
Right.
It's pretty white.
Right. I ate the spaghetti and chili. But,
the Gold Star. Okay, well, that actually is really good. Okay.
But I was thinking, well, I'm here. I'm Korean American, and I'm showing our film. And I wonder what the reception is going to be.
Yeah.
And the audience, a non-Korean, a Caucasian man who lives in Cincinnati, was just so touched by it. And he says, I know I'm not Asian, clearly, but the fact that there's a lot of family elements to it too. And me being from, I think he was Italian-American immigrant family, he said it touched me so much, and it really, affected me in some way. And him and his wife are really touched by this story. So while we do, hold on to our Korean cultures and traditions in this film, I think in the macro level, it is also a family film.
Yeah.
So the struggles of family goes too. So the fact that he was so moved by it, I was just moved by it too. And so thankful. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, because it has universal themes, and that's good storytelling when it has something that everyone can relate to some extent, or at least be educated by and informed about something new that they weren't, aware of before. So you guys, again, I'm going to say it again. This movie really, touched me deeply. And I watched it twice, actually. So I watched it back in 2019 with the ladies, right? And then I just watched it again today in preparation for the interview. But I really did want to watch it again. And as I was sitting alone on my couch, again, I'm like, totally crying again. So thanks a lot, guys. No, seriously, it really was. It's a movie that needs to be watched, and I think it's so timely for now, in ways that you guys probably didn't even expect. So congratulations, and I hope everybody can tell everyone how they can watch it now, because that's why it's coming up, because it's now streaming. Correct?
Correct. So yes, it's available on mostly all on-demand platforms: Amazon, Google, YouTube, Vimeo, Fandango, iTunes. You could buy DVDs at Walmart, Best Buy.
Right.
If you're in the West Coast, you could. I think it's on Comcast. I'm not too sure. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm not from the West, so I don't know.
That's okay. They can look it up. Yeah.
Yeah, look it up and just follow us on Happy Cleaners Film on Instagram and Facebook.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I hope you guys are continuing with other projects and continuing your great storytelling, because we need more artists to do great work like this. Art is a way to reflect life, of course, right? And it's a way that it can make it tangible and palpable for people to grasp some of these concepts. So thank you for making the film. Thank you for making the time to come on the show, guys. Really loved meeting you all and chatting with you.
Yeah, no, thank you, May.
Thank you for giving us the platform. So
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah.
All right. See you soon, and stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Okay, bye. So now I want to go to an interview with somebody who is doing something about the elderly in Korea. And again, I'm trying to connect the dots here. I heard about Mike Kim because he sent me an email telling me about what he's doing in this with this organization that he founded 6 years ago, and it's called the Korea Legacy Committee, and it's a group of young professionals like himself who have dedicated themselves to raising awareness about the plight of senior citizens in Korea, and this is a shocking statistic. Nearly 50% of senior citizens in Korea live in poverty. And it is the highest rate of any OECD country. And that, when he first told me this, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, there's no way. Because like so many other people, I thought, well, Korea, wealthy country, developed, advanced, modern, how could this be? But it is true. And when he saw this after moving to Korea, from the Bay Area, he's Korean American, he said he had to do something about it. And, going back to the whole idea of, respecting our elders, and that's the Asian sort of way, for me, this struck a chord because here is a young Korean American guy going back to Korea and seeing that there was a huge problem. And because it was instilled in him that we must respect our elders. We must show them, our gratitude. How can this be that senior citizens are starving and don't even have something to eat? He felt compelled to do something. And I really wanted to give him some space, give him the space on this show to talk about the work that they're doing and remind us all that this is a problem that is not just, in poor developing countries. It's happening in countries like South Korea. So I had a chance to speak to Mike recently about the Korea Legacy Committee and the work that they do. So here's that interview. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the show. Good to have you.
Thanks so much for having us. It's an honor.
Oh, no, it's great to have you. So listen, Mike, the stuff that you guys are doing with the Korean Legacy Committee is truly amazing because it's such a compassionate program to help the elderly in Korea. I always ask people who choose to do this voluntarily, this kind of work, what motivated you? Why did you decide to do this?
It's a great question. I mean, in a nutshell, so the movement has now hit 6 years. And I moved to Seoul 6 years ago. So I'm a born and raised Bay Area kid, born and raised in California. So, when I first came out here, I came out here in the dead of winter. And if you've been to Seoul, you know how absolutely frigid it is.
It is.
And I'll never forget the moment. I was going to work and I was at the subway station, and to the corner of my eye, I saw a harmony, an elderly grandmother, sitting on a flat piece of cardboard. And she was basically selling sticks of gum, not packs of gum. Mm-hmm. And that image was just kind of seared into my mind. How can we be a country that's so developed, a city that is so dynamic? Yep. And here we are in the heart of Gangnam, a very affluent area. And you see this level of poverty where an elderly woman, and I was wearing a coat, I was cold.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what it feels like to sit on a cold tile subway floor. And she can't be out there by choice. It's the situation where she needs to raise this money to get a meal.
Right.
And so that kind of kicked off my research into why someone would be in that position. And it hit me that Korea actually has the highest level of elderly poverty in the world of OECD countries, which is shocking.
Which is the part I couldn't believe when you had written that to me in an email to tell me about this problem. I was like, there's no way. And I don't think anybody, that's the problem, I guess. I don't think anybody would believe that because of the image that Korea has, right?
It's a country that has developed so incredibly fast. And so what people see on TV, it is a very dynamic, forward-thinking city and country.
Yeah.
But we grew so fast that certain systems to take care of those who are vulnerable are still kind of in the process of getting better. And so you see this issue of just, it's an epidemic of elderly poverty. And nearly, I think it's 48.6%. So 1 out of 2, nearly half of the elderly in this country live below the poverty line.
I mean, that's
so
crazy.
It's a major issue that we have to deal with.
Yeah, it's really mind-boggling, that statistic alone. Do you have any idea why? I mean, why is it such a pervasive problem in Korea?
I think it's a confluence of a few things. This is just my personal thoughts and some research I've done. Number one, this is the generation who are in their 80s and 90s now that literally built this country. So, you know, from 1952, 53 onwards from the war, this was, you know, what people think of Gangnam was just 시골 just country land.
Totally.
And so this generation had no generation before them that had built, you know, a pension system, had been paying taxes so that the next generation would have some kind of safety net. And so they literally built the country. The roads we're on, the subway stations we ride, the bridges, the companies that have created jobs, they built those. And so there wasn't a generation to give them the safety net. So that's number one, I think. Number two is we live in a Confucius valued society. And in that society, the parents give your kids everything. You know, every day they could work 10 jobs, and that's going towards your education for a better life, a home for the kid, just to make sure that the next generation is well off. They're not thinking of themselves.
Yeah.
In that Confucius culture, though, is that when the child does grow up and have a family and get married, they also take in their parents. But what we've seen now is that we've moved more towards kind of a Western culture. You see younger people studying abroad. They see kind of how people live in America. And so you see young kids living alone. They get married and they're living with their wife or husband, and they don't want their in-laws to live in the same house as they do. But there was kind of a social contract within that value system that I think that had been relied on for decades, and that broke down. So now you have this confluence of the systems weren't there. You have Confucian values which are breaking down, which that generation believed in and lived that way. You also have this generation, young people who are also struggling, which I recognize. You know, we don't have massive job growth. There's, you know, where the government can take tax revenue. Young people are struggling themselves. So there's this perfect storm where we just can't seem to get enough support to help the elderly.
Right. But as you have seen and witnessed yourself, because you started this Korean Legacy project, it seems like young people do want to try and make a difference. Should they just need to know how to do it? And so therefore you see that there is a willingness, right? You go out to these colleges and you create this movement. So tell me about what you see with the youth of Korea.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest with you, my thinking has evolved as well over the past 6 years living here. You know, I grew up in the Bay Area where, you know, it's kind of intrinsic where you see, you know, Thanksgiving and Christmas, people go out to soup kitchens. You see weekend car washes, bake sales. It's this kind of philanthropic charity giving. It's not huge, but you still kind of see it throughout your life. And here, though, when I first moved here, I just didn't see that. Maybe some churches or, you know, the big take-ups. You know, Samsung Hyundai will do kind of a volunteer event every few times a year.
Right.
But there wasn't a youth-driven philanthropic just push. And so I was kind of, in the very beginning, a little critical, thinking, hey, a lot of my friends are well off. They've got good jobs, but they're not giving back. But then what I also realized was that, you know, they didn't see that growing up. It wasn't as common in Korean culture because the generation before was also just trying to get by. And so, you know, I had to do a lot of learning myself and recognize, okay, the platform isn't there. And so when we did create this platform where every weekend we go out Saturdays, feed 300 to 400 elderly, my friends would see my social feed and say, hey, can I join? Some college kids say, hey, can we create a chapter? let's do it. And 6 years later, we've got 12 college chapters. Every Saturday, we're feeding, 300, 400 elderly, and we're growing college chapters every year by 5 to 7. And so we always call it a national movement, and it is a movement powered and built by young people of this country.
Right, which is great to hear. So tell me then, for people who aren't familiar with exactly what you do, you guys go out every weekend, you buy hundreds of meals that are very simple, right? And you basically serve them to whomever shows up. And that's the heartbreaking part because of how many people show up.
Yeah, so you nailed it. What we're really trying to do is feed as many elderly as possible. And so every Saturday we raise money and then we buy what we call 도시락s, which are just lunch boxes. It's, rice, some side dishes, banchans, and maybe a little bit of meat or fish. And we try, it's really how much we raise, but we try to do around 300 to 400 a weekend.
Right.
But what's heartbreaking is we'll start serving meals at around 10 in the morning. The lines will start starting at around 6 in the morning. It's frigid right now. I was just outside. It's winter right now.
Yeah.
And even with the coat on, when I go out for about 10, 15 minutes, I'm cold. But if you can imagine someone waiting for 4 hours for one 도시락,
yeah.
And some of them have even told me, we're not eating this all at once. We're going to split. This is lunch and dinner. And it's meant for one meal. So it's pretty heartbreaking. And then obviously the line is much longer than the meals we have. So when we get to the last person, it just breaks your heart when you realize they waited just as long, but we didn't have enough. And so that's what drives us and fuels us to consistently raise more money, raise awareness, and do things like this, because when people do understand this issue, they want to give.
Yeah.
So raising awareness is very critical for our movement.
And what is their reaction when they receive that meal? Like, I would imagine that they're grateful, but man, I mean, it just breaks my heart to think that these are people who've been around for 8 decades, 9 decades, 7 decades, however amount of time, but long enough to see life and have gone through a lot in their lives for them to stand in line for one meal. And, I can't imagine.
At that time in your life, in that chapter, where probably getting up is hard, it's the last thing they should be doing is worrying about where they should have a meal.
I want to mention the fact that, as you know, that there have been all these anti-Asian hate crimes going on, and especially in the Bay Area where you're from, a lot of elderly attacks. And, the reason why people have such a visceral reaction to these attacks is because it's the elderly. It's because these are senior citizens who are exceptionally vulnerable, who are doing nothing to deserve this, right? And so same for those in Korea, they worked hard and yet they're in this situation. So it is, I hope that people are moved when they see this and hear about it.
Yeah, it's a terrible, epidemic at the moment. And there's really no perfect solution other than the fact that, all of us, just regular citizens and members of the community, take a little bit of responsibility on the weekends. It's not a huge sacrifice. It's a few hours of your Saturday morning, but it changes someone's life. If you've ever really been hungry, it's painful. And so, if we can raise, these meals are on, $3-4 US dollars. And so, it may not seem like a lot of money, but that one meal can really change the outcome of someone's life. And so that's why we're so dedicated to doing this every weekend.
And for the volunteers who do the work, who are on the ground, I'm sure that it's probably pretty shocking for them initially, but as any kind of service, when you give, you oftentimes get more than you think you're going to.
100%. I mean, when we had our college chapters and our college leaders come out, in the very beginning, it's kind of shocking. It'll really hit your system. It's not something you see every day. You're seeing people who, to give you kind of the full details, it's, they're in a disheveled state. They haven't eaten in a few days. They probably haven't showered. There's a smell. And so if you are a young college kid, that may not be something you're used to. It's not something anyone's used to. And so here you are, they're hungry. They've been waiting 4 hours now for a meal. And so in the very beginning, you can see them a little kind of startled. They're kind of like, whoa, this is a lot heavier than I thought. Once the volunteer session passes, though, and they've served meals for 3 hours, they've been on the front lines, their perspective has completely changed. They feel a lot of times they say this, I came out to give, but I think I received a lot more. I've gained some perspective. There's a term in Korea among young people where they say hell chosun, where they're so mad and angry at the country. And for those reasons, some of those reasons I can understand as well. It is really hard for young people too. But when they come out, they say, you know what? Things are really hard for these elderly people. And this has given me a lot of perspective. And I want to come out next weekend and I want to serve again. And this has really kind of opened my eyes. And so you go from the very beginning, you kind of see them a little timid. They're preparing meals. The kitchen's wild. Then they get out on the lines. They see 400, 500 people in line. Like I said, they're disheveled. They've been on the streets. It's kind of something they're not used to. And then 4 hours pass, and you could see in their eyes, it just changes them.
Yeah.
Which I think that's.
How could it not? Right?
Yeah. If you get out there for 4 hours and it doesn't change you, there's something wrong. Yeah. I don't know how you could see that line, see the desperation, but also when they pick up the meal, they are so grateful. They're literally not just picking up the meal. They will hold the hand and just say thank you. They'll look into the eyes.
Ugh.
And for a young college kid, they're stunned. I can watch them. It's also because I felt the same. I remember that moment where I was just kind of in the moment and kind of handing out meals, trying to get this fast. And then one just kind of grabbed my hand and just looked at me in the eye and said, thank you. Thank you.
How do you not break down? I know. How do you not break down?
A lot of times people do cry.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the crazy thing is sometimes you see a harmony bow 90 degrees to the kids in gratitude. And so one of the things we did actually was afterwards, after our team serves a meal, we actually have a group of 3 or 4 volunteers who all they do is bow 90 degrees back to the people as they leave, because we realized, we never did this in America when we volunteered, but for us, it's very important. We're not just feeding people's stomachs, we're feeding people's hearts and minds, and we have to show that respect. So as soon as they get a meal, we have 3 people right after that meal, that table, and we have people, young kids, bowing 90 degrees back to the generation that gave us this country.
I mean, listen, I think this is such a good lesson to not just Korea, but to anyone, any society where their senior citizens are not seen as treasures or respected enough, right? That's why America has the greatest generation. But even then, people kind of forget about the sacrifices they made. And again, going back to the attacks on the elderly here in the United States, it's the idea, and I said this in a video, I said, the reason why everybody's so triggered by this is because these are people who sacrificed everything, right?
Yeah.
They did. They fought through war and famine and, military regimes. They escaped all of the horror to then build a life and work to the bone. And for them to then be attacked like this. So it's the same thing. It's the idea of respecting our elders more than we really do. Let's be honest. If everyone is honest, you would say, no, you know what, you're right. I don't enough.
Right. None of us got here alone. There was a generation before. We may not know their names, but that's more evident than ever in a country like Korea, where you can literally see the generation that built a country. Yeah, it's hard to do that maybe in other countries, but this one, you can literally see the generation that built the daegyups, that provided jobs, that then created bridges across the Han River. People look at Gangnam Style. The only reason we have Psy and K-pop is because actually that elderly generation, they built that opportunity.
Right.
So we've got to remember and recognize our role then, which is we have to give back. And if that's, raising money and feeding or just being more aware. And also in America, when you see elderly, we should be looking at them a little bit longer to see that they're okay when they get across the street or that they got home okay.
Right.
because you never know when someone can just run out of nowhere,
That's
push
right.
someone off pavement, and a life is gone.
Right.
And we can't stand for that.
Before we go, tell us how people can help. Website, all that information.
Yeah, so please follow us on Instagram. So it's Korea Legacy. That's our handle. And then also our website is korealegacy.com. If you go to korealegacy.com, you can either, if you're in Korea, you can sign up to volunteer. And so if you're coming from abroad and you want to spend a Saturday morning with us, come in, register. It's very easy. You can kind of just reserve a spot. Or if you want to donate, also on korealegacy.com, there's a donate button, and you can donate from anywhere around the world. You can be in Europe, America, anywhere. And none of us, here's the thing, none of us take a salary.
Yeah.
I have a job. Everyone on the board has a job. This is not for keeping our organization, like me running. It goes to meals.
Right.
And
right.
so, we take the money, we buy Toshi Dogs, it goes out that weekend. And so that's, if you want to give, that's how you can give.
Great. And you have an growing army of volunteers, which is so good to hear. So, Mike, it was such a pleasure talking to you, and I'm very, very proud of you as a fellow Korean American. It's amazing what you guys are doing, and I just love the fact that you have that heart of compassion and giving. So, thank you for doing the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your show. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. All right, we'll see you soon. Maybe I'll come over to Korea at some point and help you guys on a Saturday.
See you in Seoul.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I hope this episode was informative. It was inspiring to some of you. It maybe reminds us of our, sense of where we came from and the sacrifices that, those of us who came before us, like our family and our parents, our grandparents, have made these sacrifices for us, and that they deserve to be seen and heard and treated with the respect that they deserve. And so I thank everyone at Happy Cleaners for sharing their time and their, insights and their stories, and Mike, for sure, for the work that you guys continue to do. And then circling back to what's happening right now with all the assaults and the Asian hate crimes, I'm just going to remind you, there are various organizations that you can follow or, go to their websites, that kind of thing. So there's stopaapihate.org. Of course, they've been tracking all of the Asian hate crimes since last year, since the beginning of COVID, and they continue to do so. There's something called the Asian Pacific Environmental Network, APEN4EJ for short, and that's their handle on Instagram. And they're doing a lot of work to help Asian communities and really organizing different events in light of what's going on. Of course, you want to tune into Neck Shark, the co-producer of the May Lee Show, but Neck Shark, they do such an awesome job in writing articles and really keeping track of all of these terrible events, but they really try to investigate and confirm instead of just throwing something up there without confirmation. So they really do the work. They do the journalistic work. So follow them, of course. Asian Americans Advancing Justice is another organization that, just like their name says, they are advancing justice for the Asian community in many different ways. So they're a great organization. And finally, we all just need to continue the conversation. We need to continue raising awareness. I love the fact that the awareness is really now becoming more commonplace, and that people are really using their skills, their voice, they're speaking up, they're speaking out. This has to continue, and this needs to be sustained so that change can happen. This cannot just disappear and go away as if it was like the flavor of the month. So let's do all we can in any way we can. And as I said in my Instagram post, last week, do what you can. If you can spend some time with, an elderly member of your community or someone that you see who might need help, do it. These groups that have started in Oakland, helping escort the elderly, from the store or home. I mean, it's a grassroots effort. So, be creative, do what you can, because we all do need to do our part. All right. Okay, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.